This is taking forever. Oh, there we go. Okay, so sorry guys. I'm Boomer Tech, and this is the first time I'm streaming on X and on Rumble and on YouTube. So I'm pretty worried that something is going to go terribly wrong. You're going to have to hang with me if it does. I need the live chat to not troll me and tell me that something's wrong when nothing is wrong. Don't do that. Don't do that thing.
Well, now that I know you're streaming on YouTube, I'll keep it kind of safe.
You can say whatever you want, Leonarda, because I had Gypsy Crusader on and I had Emily Yukis on. And I just years ago, I was like, I want to go out in a blaze of glory. And I just cannot get banned. So I'm starting to think am I the Fed? I'm a Fed. And I just don't know. That's what's happening here. I can't believe I haven't been banned yet.
Well, you might not be showing up on their radar yet.
I don't know what's going on. It's making me kind of worried. Anyway, I have the very funny Leonarda Jonie, stand-up comedian, host of the Wrong Crowd podcast. Is there anything else you want to drop in there?
Oh, that's it. It's, incitement of violence on Twitter, apparently.
Well, we all do that.
Right?
Yeah. Let's get right into it. So I've been preparing for this interview. I've been watching a lot of your content, and I'm so interested in how your upbringing contributed to your current sense of humor. And I heard you, I just wanted to start off with this right away. I heard you tell a story about your Albanian grandfather. And I was hoping you could tell it here. That is the craziest shit I have ever heard in my life. And it has to be part of your origin story. It has to be a big part of your origin story, right?
Sure, yeah. So my family is from Montenegro. They're Albanians from Montenegro. So because the land keeps changing over there. Anyway, just so everybody knows, but they're Albanians. So my grandfather was murdered when my mother was about 4 years old. So he was a school teacher, very prominent in the community, very, very pro-Albanians and helping them. But he got into some kind of a dispute with somebody he worked with, and we don't really know what it was over. But from what I've heard, the other guy was a pretty low caliber human, and he was maybe doing something he shouldn't have been doing. So anyway, they got into some kind of fight on a Monday. My grandmother told me this, and this is how much rage runs in my family. He was still so angry about it. They made a commitment that they were going to have a duel on a Wednesday.
Like with swords?
No, with guns. It was a duel. It was a duel to the death. Right?
Oh my God, that's so
I'm not kidding. Yeah, I'm not kidding. So this was a Monday. By Wednesday, he's still angry enough that he goes to the duel. And, they're about to have their duel, and his gun doesn't fire. It jams. So the other guy shoots him and kills him.
Oh my God.
So that he was murdered, right? So, but it was it was a duel. And anyway, my grandfather's brother, was like, this isn't okay or whatever. So the guys in court, they're in trial, and they pretty much are about to let him go with some really light sentence. And basically my grandfather's brother and a couple of his cousins had orchestrated that they were going to kill this guy. And so what happened is they're all in the court. Everybody was getting screened. So somehow one person got the gun into the place, and then they got the gun to my grandfather's brother. And right when they're about to hand out the sentence, the person that was helping orchestrate goes, "Hey, what time is it?" And then he looks at the time. He goes, "Oh, you're right. It's getting late." And he got up in the middle of court and he goes, "This is my brother's gun didn't fire, but this one will." And he just shot him dead in court.
Dude, that is hardcore.
And my grandfather's uncle went to jail for 20 years. For that. They were going to kill him. They were going to do the death penalty, but everybody got up and protested, and they were like, this is our code. He was just taking revenge for his brother's murder. So I don't really know if they were supposed to have a duel, or he ran into him and then they were going to fight. Everybody's kind of unclear, but we do know what happened. There was a dispute between this guy and my dad, my grandfather. The guy shot my grandfather. My grandfather's brother killed the guy and did 20 years.
Man, that is a wild story. So it's like mob code. Like you stick with your family.
It's old tribal code.
Yeah.
Where you there's I guess it's called blood libel or something, where it's like if the family has a right to extract revenge or whatever.
We need more of that.
I don't know, man. It was pretty devastating for everybody involved. I wish my grandfather would have just contained his anger a little bit better. He could have been there
That's
to raise
true.
his
Yeah.
kids,
But I do see like too much are you familiar with the Molly Tibbetts story?
No.
Molly Tibbetts was an American, an Ohio, a small town Ohio girl who was raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant. And then at the funeral, because the family was leftist inexplicably
Oh
in
my
rural,
God.
and at the funeral, the father was like, I think he actually talked about like the importance of Mexican cuisine or something like
Okay. All right.
he, yeah. And so now after that, this was several years ago. After that, I was like, we need more pitchfork mob
Yeah.
mentality
No.
in
Yeah.
this
That's a
country because I'm always seeing people like forgiving their family's murder. I'm like, if I get murdered, I want blood
revenge.
libel.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
Revenge. And so I
Yeah.
think we need a little bit more of that. Of course, it was very destructive to your family. I'm sorry I was so insensitive, but like,
No. No.
let's
No.
start
No.
off with
No.
this
No.
traumatic family
No.
story.
Well, I mean, of course it was because then it had like reverberations, right? My mother grows
Yeah.
up without a father. She loved her dad. Her dad was like a great guy, very intelligent. It creates a wound in her, all the and then that reverberates down to me,
Yeah.
and I've done a lot of work to kind of heal all of those things for the should I ever be blessed enough to have children that I don't pass that they'll still get it because it's in your DNA. That's the thing that they're seeing that family traumas are stored in the DNA. So that's why people will have sort of fears or stuff that doesn't make any sense, and then you go back and you look at their history and you go, oh, yeah, okay, this is what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the thing about what you're saying is, yeah, that's total BS. Like this, just talk about cuckoldry. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you have really taken the mind of a group of people and you just live in it.
Yeah.
You live in it to the point that you can kill their children.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about the cultural enrichment. I mean,
It's just incredible to me. I always thought that that would be the line in the sand, especially for Europeans. Like once children get involved, once their children are starting to be raped or murdered, then everybody is going to have this real let's get them attitude joining together. And then I wasn't seeing that, and it was just horrifying. Like I cannot
yeah,
imagine being like that. Um,
that's insane. Yeah, that is insane.
yeah. So your grandmother must have been like a really tough broad.
Yeah, my grandma's still alive, and she's awesome. She's really sweet, very sweet. But the female strength, what I've learned, is very different from male strength. Because I have
Yes.
a very
Yeah.
masculine strength, which comes from how I was brought up. It doesn't work as well for women. Women are their strength that helps them accomplish things is very subtle,
Uh-huh.
and it's like it's there is a stubbornness. Like my grandma, very very stubborn. Like her brother-in-laws, her husband's brothers wanted to take the land and wanted to take her pension because they were like, we're entitled to it. He's our brother, and she was like, over my dead body, and she kept the land and she kept the pension.
Yeah.
And she was like, because they were like, give us the kids, we'll raise the kids, you go and get married. She was very young, she was 29, go get married again. And she was like, these are my kids, I'm raising them in the house that my husband gave me, on the land he gave me, with the pension he gave me.
Yeah.
this
Totally.
was a
Yeah.
time this is a time and place where there's no feminism, and they back down. I mean, she was like a freaking little bulldog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very sweet. If you mean, very sweet, loves to cook. She's a true trad wife.
Yeah, yeah. So do you think that being tough or crude is necessarily anti-feminine? I'm the same way. And when I look at actual trad babushkas, that you're right, they are not feminine, super feminine at least. They're these stout, tough women, and they've totally evolved to give birth on the floor of a pub and then survive starvation events,
Give birth on
Do
the
you
floor of a pub and then go back to work.
and then go back to work like right away. Do you think that this is an asset or a detriment in modern times? Because we'll talk about it in a second, but this transition to ultra feminine trad wife, I think it's totally inauthentic.
Yeah, it's total BS. They're making up. Let me just retweet because I didn't see that you tweeted this. So I'm going to retweet it. They're totally making up what they think it is. They're going off of the idea, but it's also like, not for nothing. It's also like these sort of new neo-Nazi groups. They're inventing whatever they think the Nazi Party was.
Right.
And it's funny because on the one hand, they're clearly saying that we've been propagandized about who the Nazis were, and they weren't these evil people who wanted to like genocide everybody.
Right.
But then they live out the propaganda version of what it means to be a Nazi.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, have you seen that?
Yes.
Where it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, that's not that you can't have it both ways. Either they're
Right.
lying and they're a different group of people, or they're telling the truth and you want to be that people again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, but it's the same thing with the trad wife. They have no real contact with that, and they sort of, you know, we're in a very problematic time right now. Everything is problematic, and we can all see it, and everybody's trying to trace where did it start, and so we're trying to go back. We can only go back as far as our living memory. That's the thing. And so in our living memory, we remember a time where women supposedly were subservient and you know, did as they were told. But once again, these people are basing their idea of what a traditional wife was off of the Hollywood propaganda of the 1950s, which, by the way, is meant to sell you an image of this time period that is horrible, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This was one of the things I realized about that Mad Men. I had watched it, and every time I watched only the first couple of seasons. It was before I was awake. I remember feeling, I was like, why do I feel so horrible? This whole show makes me just feel down and my energy down and everything. And now I realize it was propaganda.
Yeah.
It was propaganda to everything in it was so dark and grim and controlled, and it made women seem like they were disposable and nobody cared about that whole thing, right? And so they're basing their idea of that time off of this propaganda, and so that's why when they act it out, it's so repulsive. You're like,
Right.
nobody's going to want to go to that. First of all, that never even existed.
It never did exist because women had a real role in the family, and they worked hard. They worked really, really hard. And they had kids back to back, and they lost a lot of their children. And it wasn't this idealized version of it. And I've heard you talk about her, but I think the worst violator is Esty Williams, because she just has this like really demure attitude, and then it's just her
Is
tits.
that the blonde with the big tits?
Yes. And
Okay,
she
I
doesn't
didn't know
have
her name.
kids, which wouldn't be a criticism if she wasn't doing this trad wife thing. I'm like, listen,
Right.
I have kids. I'm always covered in barf or something. Like my house is a fucking mess all the time. Having it's incompatible. Having many children is incompatible with this lifestyle that you were trying to portray. And
Right.
there's this big fissure of people online on the right that are like, well, we should be presenting an idealized version of traditional wives. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but I don't think that people realize that this is so idealized. And I think it's going to create this massive fissure between like the juxtaposition between what they thought they were getting and what they do get. And you know, I'm not like really into this super realistic post-birth body content either. Like nobody really needs to see that, but somewhere in the middle here, right? Like between Esty Williams and like me going on Instagram and somebody's posted a picture of their rectal prolapse or whatever from birth.
Right.
Like, okay, like let's find something in the middle here so that people have something realistic to strive for in their marriage. And I don't think that we can really escape egalitarianism. This is a question that I wanted to ask you. So I have a lot of friends that are in patriarchal leaning marriages or relationships. But the ones that I see that are staunchly patriarchal, they have all of these issues because it doesn't really work out in practice. Like they have patriarchal duties in the marriage, but then the woman is still bringing an income, and so there are all these resentments brewing or whatever because there are certain elements of egalitarianism that have been incorporated into the marriage, and people don't understand that. Like, nope, you got to be all the man is the sole provider and makes the decisions, and that's his domain, and then the woman is in charge of the house. So how do you think we can balance this in relationships to reduce the rate of divorce?
You've got a couple of problems there too, right? Once again, you're trying to go back to something that never even existed. That's the
Yeah.
first problem. This sheer patriarchal, he makes all the decisions. That's really unrealistic. That actually describes a lot of what I would consider kind of unhealthy relationships of the past. Those things existed for
Yeah.
sure. They even
Yeah.
existed back in my culture, which is only 2 generations back that I can look at. But there was, there was a lot of traditional relationships where that wasn't the case. So even in that time period, there were men who were beating their wives, for example, and everybody in that time period kind of looked down on that and were like, yeah, that's not a good thing. Now what they didn't do was, go in and interfere. Like, they kind of still felt like, all right, that's between them, and you don't get divorced and all that stuff. But when those women eventually got fed up, especially as they got older and the kids grew up and they kind of just really distanced themselves from that, nobody really blamed the women.
Yeah.
Even in that time, that
Right.
old
Right.
freaking 1800s mentality, right?
Yeah.
They still
Yeah.
had a real serious awareness that, like, hey, that kind of behavior is really degenerate and abhorrent, and it doesn't
Yes. Yeah.
really fit. Here's the thing, that doesn't really fit white culture. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the
It
thing.
doesn't. Yeah.
If you want to go look at all the places that really have that kind of real severe disparity between men and women, you're talking about third world nations.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Middle East, you're talking about India, you're talking about Africa. So, is this what we want to create? You're talking about Latin America. Is this what you want to create, or do you want to recognize that the elements of white culture that made us what we are worth preserving, and that you can't just sit here and blame women and be like, oh, it's because we gave them rights or gave them the right to vote. It's like, no, it's the same thing that is making men gay and trans and everything. It's the indoctrination. You understand? It's
Yeah.
the same thing that's turned, men being like, oh, we should forgive the murderer of my child. It's indoctrination and a weaponizing of our higher qualities, which is our
Hmm.
empathy and our compassion and all of these things. And so there's a weaponizing of the way that male female relationships in white culture tend to be a little bit more egalitarian, with the men having a bit of more of a leadership role, which I think everybody would actually want. But there is a kind of respect that he has for his wife, and a consideration, and a kind of mutual discussion around important decisions. Although ultimately, if there's a major disagreement or whatever, he's going to take the lead.
Right.
So this idea that they're creating never existed. It doesn't fit white culture. It's an imposition trying to fix something that did go wrong, but you're not diagnosing the problem correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
definitely true. Yeah.
so
Um.
that so and then you also are ignoring that we have lived a whole different life that, say, our patriarchal grandparents did it. They never went through the feminist revolution. They never went through the period where women could make their own money. They never went through the quote unquote sexual liberation, which is
Mhm.
sexual, I believe, oppression. So we have to deal with those elements, and we can't just deal with it by putting on a band-aid and going, this is
Right.
what worked before. Yeah, it worked before all these conditions existed.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially that we've grown acclimated to having a two-income household, which has made it necessary for almost every marriage. I mean, and then once women are introduced to the workforce, you can't maintain those other conditions. It's just
No,
nearly impossible.
you can't. And of course, if she's bringing in money, she's going to want a role in the decisions that are made there, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and I do think, there is, first of all, even in the quote unquote trad, my grandmother didn't work outside of the house, but she farmed, she took care of the livestock, she cooked, growing up, she had to make flour out of grain. I mean, literally, that's what they did. So she was working. There
All the
was no
time.
part of
Yeah.
her that wasn't work. I mean, that was the work then.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's a kind of infantilization of women that's happening under these patriarchal systems, where it's like, I'll take care of everything that you need, you just be my little baby doll or whatever. And
Right.
you'll see this in those kind of relationships, those severe economic discrepancy relationships, where it's a young girl and this guy's got all this money. Like, we see these in the celeb, oh, you're just going to be my little baby doll. There's an infantilization, which I think is unhealthy.
Right. And then you age out of your own marriage. So you become obsolete because you've based it on sexual market value and
Right.
and other things. It's a really stupid strategy. I'm not saying that women should weight or anything like that. And I actually don't have a problem with is it May December romances? I'm
I don't know
retarded.
what that is.
Oh, like an older man and a younger woman.
Oh.
It often works, but when the
I agree that it often works, but I also think people should just in general be getting married younger. Like,
yeah.
I have cousins who, the one's 25 and the girl's 21, and they're like together and
Yeah.
they're headed towards marriage. And
Yeah,
you're
great.
oh
Yeah.
no, you should wait. Why?
Why?
They're pretty on par with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the propaganda, so I heard you talking about this primal joy that you experienced when you were feeding your friend's baby Cheerios,
Oh
and
yeah.
you're like, I'm keeping this baby alive. And something similar happened when I think it was your brother. He was depressed, and you made him a sandwich, and like
Yeah.
that feeling that you got when you nourished him.
It was great.
It makes me so happy in my own family. And do you think it's possible for propaganda to totally suppress this natural instinct, because it's so strong? It's like the equivalent of the male sex drive in how poignant and instinctive it is for women.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't underestimate the ability of propaganda to completely turn us against our own nature.
It's crazy, isn't it?
You just have to see these women who are screaming about their rights to kill their own unborn children, which is the exact opposite. I mean, you want to talk about something that would be almost impossible to accomplish?
Yes.
Would be to turn a mother's instinct to die for her children to a murderous one. That's why murderous mothers throughout time have been looked upon as such an abomination. I mean, you have the story of Medea, the Greek tragedy, where she kills her own kids. I don't know if you know it. She kills her own kids because her husband ends up leaving her for, I think, a princess or something. And out of sheer jealousy and spite to get back at the husband, she kills the kids and she kills herself.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, mission accomplished, but oh my God, what an absolute abhorrent. It just makes your bones chill.
Yes.
And now we have that every day. And they're not even doing it for spite. They're doing it because they think, the kid's going to ruin their life,
Yep. Yeah.
So as somebody who also had propaganda turn me against my own nature, where I'd made decisions and something in me was deeply unhappy with them. But what would happen is the voice, like, okay, for example, and I didn't do a lot of this, but I was married when I was 25. I got divorced at 29, and that was like my first anything. And I had lived the whole traditional, like, thinking that that's the way it was. And so now I'm listening to the mainstream going, no, that's not what you should do. You should have tons of casual hookups or whatever. And I couldn't do it. I there was like one or two, and after each thing, I felt this deep, tremendous feeling like I had done something horribly wrong.
Yeah.
I felt bad about myself, and I would wake up in the morning with my mother's voice reverberating in my head, like, what did you do? What did you do? And my mother, even if I had told her that, she probably would have been like, yeah, that's not good, and we don't do that. But like, when I came up with this, and I would talk to some of my liberal girlfriends, they'd be like, oh, well, that's the socialization. You've socialized and internalized that shame and that guilt, and what you have to do is just push through it and do more of it. And that's how demonic the thing is, right? So I can imagine that women who have an abortion probably, there's probably a lot of them that feel that feeling.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But then say, oh, well, that's because we've been socialized to believe we're caretakers, and I just have to push through this.
Totally. And that's why you see women doing the shout your abortion stuff. Like, if you really felt like something was morally neutral, even, you wouldn't have to go out in the streets and be like, this is okay. This is okay. Correct. What I did. Yeah.
I think it's a confession. Mm-hmm. It's the same way that trans people try to scream at you to accept their identity.
Totally.
It's their own internal self that does not accept the decision they made. And then they project that onto everybody else, and they believe that if they can get everybody else to say, yes, you're a woman, or yes, it's totally okay to have an abortion, then they'll finally feel that way themselves. But they don't realize you could get everybody in the world to go ahead and say it and believe it and act like that, and it's not going to work, because that there's a part of us inside that always knows the truth and is trying to get out.
Yes, and I
So
believe that that part of us is that our conscience is from God. And so
I
unless you
agree with that.
confess
I
your
agree with that.
sins
I agree with
and
that.
accept that you have been taken over by like a demonic presence in your life and that you've given into sin, that there's no escaping.
Or
Like I
that
don't
you
want
allowed
women.
yourself to be misled and that you
Yes, yeah, yeah.
believe something that wasn't true and you deeply regret it
And that
and
you deeply
remorse.
regret it. Exactly. I don't want women that have had abortions to destroy the rest of their lives and to live in like this horrible
Correct.
cloud of guilt.
Correct.
What I want them to do is to realize the error of their ways, the magnitude of their sin, and to stop. This is imperative to stop leading younger women into a life of sin because that
Correct.
is the most demonic way that you could deal with your own sin. And I think that that is the heart of feminism is like, I did this thing. My conscience is telling me that it was wrong. But to validate my poor decisions, I need to bring young blood into this cult of sin. And that is why I hate feminism so much. Older women have absolutely just shit the bed on this
They
one.
ruin younger
Yeah.
women. They
Yes.
ruin them.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I mean, this is one of the things that I advocate for. People like to bring up, what things I did in my feminist past. And I'm like, yeah, do you not understand that I literally deprogrammed? Nobody came and got me.
Yeah.
No older woman came and told me, hey, sweetie,
You
I
deprogrammed
deprogrammed
yourself. Yeah.
myself because there was a feeling inside me that something wasn't right. And I kept following it and looking for more information. And then, having the courage to come out and say, no, we have to go this way when I could have easily doubled down,
Yes.
capitalized on it. By the way, the whole fucking leftist machine would have
Oh
pushed
yeah.
me
Yeah. Yeah.
forward, right? Because I'm funny, and if I was funny in that kind of particular way, they would have been like, "Here we go,
Yeah.
this is our thing," Um, and they don't, people. There's a lot of these sort of like puritanical, like people who've never lived in their life and never really made any mistakes, who want to bat down on anyone who has and who comes out and says, "Yeah, no, let's not do that. Let's turn away from that because that was wrong." And so that's a part of why a lot of
But
these
that
people
takes
will double
courage, you
down.
know?
Well, it takes courage, and that's not a quality that a lot of women have these days.
Yeah.
Back,
Yeah.
but like real, like the kind of the kind of women that are not going to be all about the, wow, let's do the traditional LARP and all that bullshit. They're going to have real courage that will is what you need. You need that.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, do you feel like you've been canceled in the
I don't think.
comedy community? I
I
guess.
mean, yes and no. Yes, there's some groups who just won't work with me anymore or refuse to be on a show with me. I mean, I've gotten,
What a bunch of pussies. Good
yeah,
lord.
currently shadow banned on Instagram, lost an Instagram account, went through shadow banning on X. Um, Probably will never have a Netflix special, which is totally fine because the whole thing is BS. So yes,
No,
in
just
that
have
way,
5 abortions and then you can have your Netflix special.
yeah, no, thank you. I mean, talk about the lesson of sacrificing your soul for the world, and it's nothing. It's worth
Mhm.
nothing, and
Yeah.
that's something I tell. Like, this was something I was telling, like, they're young female comedians that I've talked to, and I said, hey, let's take this down the road here, because you're like, I don't want to get married, I don't want to have kids because I want to be the successful comedian. I go, let's look at some of the successful ones who got to where they're going to go. They're in their 40s, they have millions of dollars, they cannot maintain a stable romantic relationship, and they have no kids.
Yeah.
I said, think about that. I was like, would you like to be in that position, or would you accept maybe having less of a career, but you have this full life?
Right.
And they can't admit it. They
Yeah.
can't admit that what's and I probably couldn't have admitted that either at that age, because I was so deeply ingrained in this mentality. But now I see it. I'm like, yeah, because I think I've talked about this. I talk about having kids with my fiance, and he's like, it's going to derail your career. And I was like, I don't give a fuck. I
Yeah,
was like, first
totally.
of all, it's not necessarily true. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily true. Yeah, maybe it'll take some of the steam out. Maybe, who knows, right?
Ali Wong killed it, height of her career when she was pregnant
Yeah,
and had kids. Yeah.
and I'm like, you don't know that. And I was like, second of all, if I play the tape forward and I'm 50 years old and I've got this massive success, but I don't have a family, that feels like a failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yep.
People
Yeah.
need to know that, and they really need to play the tape forward, because You know, we're romanticizing fame and wealth, and this is for men too, right? In a way that doesn't actually make any sense. The only reason people ever wanted wealth was to be able to sustain life.
Right. But the left is a cult of death. So it's like,
It is.
what is wealth?
It's a death cult. That's correct. It's a death.
So what is the wealth going to do for you? Besides
Well,
perpetuate this death cult.
right. Well, it will buy them momentary pleasures and fun
Mm-hmm.
and distractions from the lack of meaning and purpose in their life.
Yeah, of course, but they have to know that there's no bottom to that. Like if you are shopping or if you're drinking, you're just trying to fill a void with another void. And that descent into hell is just endless. Like you never find the bottom. And I think that that's what we're seeing with this Epstein culture. It's like people don't start off with this kind of like all this really horrible stuff that happens in Hollywood. It's like you start going down that road and then you just need more and more and more. Well, and you never find it.
Anybody who's ever watched porn will tell you, right? If you start the real simple things, do it. But then as you continue, you start looking for more and more degenerate. And this is actually proven why. It's because the synapses for arousal are right next to the ones for repulsion.
Yeah.
So once you fire these off too much and they get dull, this can activate that again because it's right there.
Oh God, that is bleak.
So that's why people will get to more and more degenerate stuff where they have to start watching, 50 people gangbangs and rough, and
this is what serial killers say also. Like they all start off as peeping toms or by like kicking a cat and then they're like, I just needed more.
Yep.
So we all need to realize like where our sin leads us. Like it leads you to hell. That's how it always goes. I had another question about comedy. So I hear a lot of comedians talking about the poor state of comedy over the last, decade. But now I'm seeing this new league of comedians becoming popular that are really pushing the boundaries. Do you think that woke culture has actually been an opportunity for your career?
Yes, in the sense that people were so sick of it. They were so sick of it that anybody who was saying anything slightly offensive was garnering a tremendous amount of attention from an underserved community, which is the majority of Americans. Most Americans are not woke. Most Americans do not live in the city. Let's be real. Okay, most Americans have been brainwashed to a huge extent. People even like in the middle of the country are afraid of getting labeled racist or anti-Semitic because of the propaganda that's
and then the vaccine shit too. Right. People ended up being such retards.
Yeah, they're not like woke on the you can't say anything, you can't make any jokes, you can't poke fun at the trans. Like they're not. So you had a huge amount of the country that was underserved that knew what was up. And more people have been adding to that the further that side goes. So anybody who is brave enough to go against it, which is not a lot because most people are followers and they don't want the heat. Yeah. I get the heat and I'm telling you it's hard. I have to take days off.
Yep, totally.
Because it's hard because I'm a woman and I'm still sensitive and I still have fucking emotions and that's what it is. Maybe if I was a man, maybe if I was like Dan Bilzerian and I was like, I'm gonna fuck, maybe I could keep doing that, but I am still a woman.
That guy does not give a fuck. That is true.
He's awesome, dude. He's fucking awesome, man. And it's exactly the epitome of the kind of strong male leadership.
I know. That's funny you bring that up because I remember watching him for the first time and thinking like, I bet this guy sleeps like a baby. Like just nothing touches him, lucky bastard.
Yeah, it's probably why it doesn't bother him. Meanwhile, I'm having like anxiety attacks and
I'm in like a corner. I'm having a panic.
I said too much. It was too much.
And there's no unringing that bell too. Like as soon as you start going down this road, it's like
you start getting more and more radicalized.
Yes, and I want to talk about.
But it's actually just coming back to nature. I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. My introduction to you was your joke about Lizzo, which made me laugh really hard. And seeing you on the Whatever podcast, this was like a real moment for me because I'm like, I started to believe that these podcasts were like, not like a Mossad operation, but I'm like, Jews are behind this somehow
Yeah,
because
it's a black pill operation.
because it's a black pill operation. Yeah. So I saw you on the Whatever podcast getting shut down so fast just because you mentioned Mossad. Like, you didn't say Jews, you didn't say Israel, and then this guy's like, "Oh, blah, 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 blah. We can't talk about
Well,
Israel and Palestine."
I did say Israel, and that's what made his thing go, because I was
Oh,
saying
okay. I thought you just said Mossad.
I was saying Israel's, and I couldn't even get the word Mossad out, because
Okay.
when I mentioned Israel was like, and it could be, listen, it could be because he's being funded by them. I don't know that. I can't make that accusation. It could also just as equally be the brainwashing that every normal person has subject to, that the minute they hear somebody say Jew or Jewish or Israel, they go, oh my God, you're being anti-Semitic. This is the primal sin that we cannot
Right.
do.
But on a podcast talking about gender relations, like, as far as I'm concerned, you cannot broach the subject of modern gender relations without talking about Jewish subversion. You can't do it.
I know.
So what they're doing is just a black pill. It's just making, and it's actually very smart. They're wildly popular because of the entertainment value. I mean, we watched like Jerry Springer growing up. It's like that. So they bring in all these.
Also, by the way, Jewish propaganda.
Yes, Jerry Springer was Jewish. Yes. So they bring in
make
all
everybody
these.
think Americans were stupid and dumb.
Yes, and Hicks and ghetto and all this other stuff.
Yes.
They bring in all these actual whores and then get a bunch of men who aren't really having a lot of sexual contact to believe that this small subset of actual whores can be extrapolated to the entire population of modern dating. And it's so blackpilling because they're like, why should I even try? And it makes them debase women further. And then it makes women think that men just think that they're whores, which they do. So
which then makes them go, well, if you're going to think that, then I might as well be that. And that seems to be what the men want. So
yes, it's actually really smart
in sexual purity or
yeah. So I really thought that this was like a watershed moment, that he's like, you can say anything you want to about women, but we can't talk about Jews.
What the source is. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Which was insane to me, because I was like, hey, if we're going to talk about this fall of gender relationships and feminism has ruined women and ruined men, you need to talk about where it came from.
Exactly.
Where did it come from?
Yeah.
And I was being very political because I was saying it came from the intelligence agencies of these three countries.
Yeah, I thought you were really tactful. I was like, that's smart what she's trying to do.
Yeah.
And it actually demonstrated that point even more clearly, because you didn't quite touch it. And so it wasn't inflammatory enough to justify his response. And so I was watching and I was like, oh my God, like it's happening. This is happening.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Well,
I know.
The other part, I mean, I went on there intentionally to kind of be a counterpoint to all the women that they have there, and to talk about, and I said it, I was very clear. I was like, I think you guys are also wrong in your presentation. I don't agree with it.
Of course.
And so they invited me on, knowing that I didn't come in as a secret agent and was like, but I don't think he expected me to be as informed and intelligent as I was. And I don't even think he knew about all this stuff, He just knows this gets views. Let's talk about it.
Totally. Yeah. On the right, I think we fall into this trap of thinking that everything is some kind of conspiracy theory or is like orchestrated to the detail. No, sometimes people just fill the void of what makes money, and they don't really realize that they're controlled opposition. And I think that that Whatever podcast and these other Pearl, I think, probably falls into that category. Some other people, I don't even think they realize.
Yeah. Some of them might not realize. Some of them might be getting funding. They might be getting funding. They might be being propagated, but have no idea why or what the point is or anything like that. They just might get, if they ever go or they might just intuitively know, like we all intuitively know, don't mention this, don't mention the Jews, don't mention, race crime statistics, because you're going to get shut down. Like, don't mention any of that. So we might all intuitively know this and just avoid the topic like that, especially when you have funding behind you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, and then also they may not even care. They may not care to consider that they're blackpilling people and that they're further driving apart race relations through these things, because at the end of the day, they're getting their bills paid and that's their job.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So there's a lack of conscientiousness on lots of levels.
But they are tapping into something real in society, which is that men and women don't understand what the opposite sex likes and hates. And you've done a few bits on these that I thought were were really good, really concise. Men don't care about women's jobs, you know. Women
If
don't want to
they
see a man
do,
cry.
I will tell you this: if they do, they are there to use you.
Totally. That's totally
Because
true.
in
Yeah.
my dating history, I have come across men older who would ask me questions about how much I made, what I did, all this stuff. And I was too young to realize what was going on. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, they're so interested in me and they're impressed by me and my accolades. Then it turned out that they just wanted to live off of me.
Yeah.
And they were trying to see if I could meet their fucking, standard of living, which
Exactly.
is
Yep.
disgusting.
Yep.
You're a
Yeah, yeah.
disgusting human being.
When I was in Seattle a few weeks ago, I was eating ramen and I was next to a booth with two like nerdy, normal looking guys that were having lunch. And I heard one of them say um, that his girlfriend's OnlyFans is really helping them financially.
It's disgusting. That's disgusting. You're a
Yeah. I
disgusting
was like,
person. You're
what
not a
the
real
fuck is
man.
happening? Yeah.
You've been cucked. And this is what I say to women all the time. If you meet a guy and he says he believes in equality, run.
Yeah.
Because what that means is he doesn't want to provide or protect for you, and you get him off the hook, and he gets off the hook by appealing to this ideology, which makes him seem like he's actually good and a morally superior guy, but actually he's diabolical and
Totally.
he's maybe a psychopath.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 And then the other thing that you said is women don't want to see a man cry, which is totally
No, we
true.
don't.
No.
We don't.
Like I feel like if you're crying, somebody better be dead. You better
Yes,
have
there
seen
are
your dog
exceptions. There
get
are
run over
exceptions.
by a car. There are a few exemptions, but like they're really really pushing it.
Yeah, if you cry because something went the wrong way for you, or you don't like the way somebody treated you, I mean, what are we gonna do? We have to
Yeah.
take care of you for that? Like,
Ugh. Oh,
no.
just visceral reaction. But do you think that this misunderstanding between men and women is a product of men and women not understanding each other or not understanding themselves?
Probably both. Probably both. I mean, I tell this story about how I went on a date one time with this guy, and it was in New York City, and it was where he was walking me to the train, and then some kind of vagrant started coming towards us, and I kind of leaned into him, and he was like, "Oh, well, you'd probably do a better job of protecting us than I would," and I was like, "What the?"
Oh,
Yeah, but I didn't know yet. I was still feminist, and I felt something sit in the pit of my stomach where I was like, "That doesn't feel right." But then I immediately, right, here's the brainwashing. So this is where the brainwashing can fight your own instincts. My brain started going, well, I mean, why I didn't understand why I felt that way, because I thought, well, right, I didn't know that what you need what it is that you need a man for. I thought, well, why should I want him to protect me? I mean, that doesn't make sense, and we're both kind of on the same level. I couldn't even quite articulate my justification away from that feeling,
it's the
but that
ick.
but the feeling was telling me, hi, this is contrary to nature. This is contrary to what you want. This man has no real purpose in your life.
Totally. That is exactly right. Yeah. I mean, and it's just incredible that propaganda has allowed us to not listen to our deepest desires, our deepest instincts. It's
Yes.
crazy to me that Jews can do this.
Yes. Yes.
I know.
But that's the thing about propaganda. Propaganda is excellent. Excellent. It
Yeah.
really can get you to fight against your own nature and fight against what you know. I mean, look at what happened in communist Russia. You
Yes.
had children
Turning in
turning
their
in their own
parents.
parents to die. That is contrary to nature.
Uh-huh.
Children love their parents unconditionally.
Yep.
They're born with that.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that we probably, I mean, I get these messages too, like, you were living in a city and blah, 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 and you're not trad. I'm like, I'm not trying to portray myself as some trad wife. Like there is great utility in being like, don't do these things. These things will lead you down a path of darkness. And
Yeah.
I would like to point out the people that, especially people that stood up to the vaccine initiative, have survived perhaps the most effective, controlled, expensive, widespread propaganda in human history.
Correct.
And that's no small thing. And people that were able to do that should be deeply proud of the courage and the perseverance that they were able to demonstrate during this time in human history. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I didn't get vaccinated. I'm proud that I told people not to get vaccinated. But there is no shame in coming out of a life of darkness and being like, don't do what I did. The real
Right.
shame would be bringing people into the darkness with you. And
That's
that is
correct.
the biggest
Or
problem that I have.
keeping silent.
Or keeping
Keeping
silent, of
silent
course.
when, because you can do it just by keeping silent because you don't
Yes.
want to be known for the mistakes you made or whatever. But
Mhm.
it's the same problem. you
Yep.
know.
Yeah. I've seen you do a little bit of stand up about the vaccine. What year was that you did that?
I think that was 2022.
So how were you received? You were doing comedy clubs in like major US cities, right?
Yes.
Okay.
New York was, it was like going into a hostile environment of people who wanted to kill you. First of all, they hate you automatically because you're white. You're
Yeah.
a straight white woman. They'll give you some leeway because you're a woman, but the minute you start going up
Not
there and
enough.
talking,
Yeah.
well, the minute you go up there and you start talking, they realize, hey, wait a second, she's not quote unquote on our side, even though I'm more on their side than anybody else.
I know.
You know,
Too bad you aren't black. Just kidding. That would be a disaster.
they turn hostile. The young, so older black people were like all about it because older black people have a kind of touchstone to realness.
Yeah.
They know that they're being lied to, even though a lot of them couldn't. They lack the cognitive ability to realize, wait a second, maybe you shouldn't get the vaccine. If you believe the government's lying to you, why are you getting vaccinated, kind of thing. But they do have a kind of touchstone to realness, and they can tell when somebody's bullshitting them. So they were fine with it. But the younger black crowd, especially like this sort of mixed race and went to college and have a higher opinion of themselves than they really deserve, would just felt entitled to a kind of violence you could feel radiating from them, that if there weren't civil protections, they would have physically attacked me. And I knew that, and I was aware of it. So that's what I was like in there. But when I moved to Austin, there was much more positive reception because even though Austin's liberal, the comedy crowds were people that were drawn from these liberal places that were over it. And they were a little bit more right leaning, and they were more in favor of the truth, and they loved it. They loved that stuff. Now, I will say that I did that bit on Kill Tony, and maybe just a year before, I had, spoken out against the vaccine and the masks with people who run that show, and I got like, all right, that's like kind of like what happened on the Whatever Pod, where they want to shut it down and mock you or whatever, and then a year later, the whole tide starts turning, and I'm doing the same bit I was doing that, and it's like, oh my god, this is great.
I know.
That's what you have to remember when you're kind of a trailblazer, is that, and not me per se, but some of these things were trailblazing and they were ahead of the curve that was coming. You're gonna get hate at first, and that hate might last a short time, it might last a long time, but eventually people will catch up to the truth. And that might not happen until after you die, by the way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. When I'm making videos, I'm thinking like, man, I hope that people really appreciate this posthumously.
Yeah, but I think it's going to happen earlier.
I hope so. I mean, this vaccine thing, I will say it was a disaster, of course, but I don't think I've ever had a more validating experience in my life than being right about COVID, because I was pregnant and I'm a hypochondriac. So I was like,
wow.
If you people cannot fucking, get a clear mind about what is going on, and I was able to, you must be retarded. Like, you all must be retarded.
Yes.
It's really hard to respect people after that, man. Like, people really wanted to submit hard to Big Daddy government. They just really did.
Yes, they did, and they loved being able to have that make them better than you.
Yeah.
Look at how much how much of a better person I am.
Yeah.
They easily suck that in. Easily.
That's exactly true. I just had one more question for you. I heard you say that you were raised Muslim. I don't know what ages that was or anything like that, but do you think that contributed to your ability to withstand these public pressures? I've said a lot of stuff about Islam, but lately they've been looking a lot more like friend than foe, I gotta say.
Yeah, I do. I mean, so I'll say this. I was raised Albanian. That's first. Like, Albanian Muslims in particular, in general, right? will be Albanian first and Muslim second. And so even in my own household, it was kind of like the way that I guess you would say people are Catholic these days. Like they celebrate Christmas, right?
Yeah.
And they celebrate Easter. And it was exactly the same.
So you're like nominally Muslim.
There wasn't, and this is something I believe, and I do speak about, and I do get some hate from some people. I don't think it's compatible with the European sentiment. I just don't. I think it's incompatible with the European spirit for lots of reasons, and it was imposed on the Albanians with the Ottoman Empire, and so there's always been within the Albanians a kind of resistance to letting it like really take over because it was forced. It wasn't like, oh, we believe this, but it's been 500 years, so now it's just like, I mean, this is just what we are. We pretty much don't eat pork. And we celebrate the two major holidays.
Yeah.
And that's it. But it's not uncommon to go to an Albanian's house and he puts down a bottle of Albanian moonshine and goes drink. You know what I mean? That you would never have that in like a Middle Eastern Muslim house. That would never happen.
Yeah.
So I'll say what probably did it was being raised Albanian, because it is a very tribal group. It's a very ferocious group. It's a group of tremendous courage and resistance to pressures to erase them. They are I think they're the only group of people that is indigenous to the Balkans.
Yeah.
It's one of the oldest languages on the Indo-European branch, and they could only survive that way through a tremendous stubbornness. And they have a real refusal to marry outside of the Albanian culture, which I used to be like, in my liberal, and now I'm like, no, that's good. You guys, keep it up, even though I'm marrying a totally Nordic American dude, but I'm American, so
that's true. Yep. As soon as anybody gets to America, it's kind of like you lose that sense of culture in the most meaningful ways.
Yeah.
Which is a mixed bag. I mean, it's a bummer. Although
it's a mixed bag, but on the whole, I think it's good for us to kind of shed some of the more Turkish influences that have happened on the culture that I don't like and I speak out against.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's contrary to the European soul.
Well, it's nice to hear you say that. There is a European soul, and I wish people would really look inward and respect it and base their immigration decisions and their voting decisions on whether or not it's a violation of that European spirit. They are clearly failing to do that, but we have that problem in America too. So,
well, they've been propagandized against it.
Once
again, remember, people have been taught that the same way I was taught that, you're only experiencing these feelings of guilt and shame because socialization, and you have to break through that. Oh, you're only experiencing these feelings of pride and wanting to be around white people because you have internalized racism. Not because there's a real acknowledgement of your own survival and that people feel generally at ease amongst their own people, and that you are seeing every day a sort of hostility towards you based on your whiteness. Not because of that. It's because you have internalized racism and you have to work through it. And you go, this isn't for us. This isn't for our benefit.
That's definitely true. On that note, let's close out. Thank you so much for joining me. That was such an informative conversation. Thank you everybody that joined us on YouTube, Twitter. This is Leonarda Jonie. I'm going to drop her links in the description soon. Check her out on Twitter, Instagram. Really, 1 second. And Twitter, Instagram. You have a YouTube channel. I'll link all that below after this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. That was such a lovely discussion.
Thanks for having me.
See you soon. Bye, guys.